The words hung in the air like a dead sentence. I stood there, frozen, unable to process what he was saying. Divorce. The word echoed in my mind, sharp and painful. Steve, we can walk through this, I said, my voice trembling. We're a family. We can get through this together. He shook his head. No, Rita, I've made up my mind. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I want you and Junior out of the house by the end of the week. My heart sank. This was real. He wasn't just lashing out in anger. He meant it. I remember the exact moment when my world began to crumble. It wasn't sudden, not like a bomb dropping from the sky, but more like a slow, steady erosion, a crack in the foundation that I noticed too late. Rita, how many times have I told you not to waste money on this nonsense? Steve's voice, usually calm, had an edge of anger that had become all too familiar. He flung the credit card statement onto the dining table, the paper sliding across the surface like a snake slithering through grass. I didn't waste any money, Steve, I replied, keeping my voice even. I had learned, through years of marriage, that raising my voice would only make things worse. The groceries, school supplies for Junior, and the electric bill, those aren't nonsense. He scoffed, his face twisted in anger. You always have an excuse, don't you? Always justifying your spending. Maybe if you had listened to me about those investments, we wouldn't be in this mess. The mess, the black hole that had swallowed our finances, our marriage, our peace. He was right about the mess, at least. But it wasn't the grocery that had drained our account. It was his investments, his grand ideas that never seemed to materialize. I did listen, Steve, I said, keeping my eyes fixed on the table. But you wouldn't hear me when I tried to help. You didn't want to hear it from me. You don't know anything about investments, Rita. You were just a bank assistant, not even a real manager. Your job was to follow orders, not to make decisions. His words hit me like a slap. I had left that job, left behind my career, my independence, because he had asked me to. Steve didn't need my help. He needed my attention, my presence at home. And so I had resigned, believing that my sacrifice was for the greater good of our family. But now, here we were, bank statements with numbers that didn't add up, bills piling up like autumn leaves in the corner of the room, and a husband who was spiraling into bitterness and rage. I was good at my job, Steve, I said softly, and I could have helped you if you had let me. Help? He laughed, a harsh sound that cut through the room. Help? You're a woman, Rita. Your place is here, in the house, not in the world of business. That's my domain. I beat back the retort that rose to my lips. What would be the point? He had made up his mind long ago about my role, my worth. Arguing wouldn't change that. Silence fell between us, thick and heavy. Steve pushed his chair back abruptly, the legs scraping against the floor, and walked out of the room without any word. The slam of the door echoed through the house, rattling the pictures framed on the walls. I stood there, the silence pressing down on me, squeezing my chest until it was hard to breathe. I stared at the credit card statement on the table, the numbers blurring before my eyes. I could feel it. Everything was slipping away. The life we had built, the dreams we once shared, all eroding under the weight of his anger and my helplessness. Days turned into weeks, and the tension in the house grew thicker, more suffocating. Steve barely spoke to me except to criticize, to find fault in everything I did. He didn't eat the meals I cooked, didn't sleep in our bed. I could feel him pulling away, piece by piece, until there was almost nothing left between us. One evening, as I was tucking Junior into bed, Steve walked into the room. His face was set in that familiar mask of cold anger, but there was something else in his eyes, something I couldn't quite place. Rita, we need to talk, he said, his voice flat. I nodded, pressing a kiss to Junior's forehead before following Steve out of the room. We went to the living room, where he stood by the window, his back to me, staring out into the darkness. I've been thinking, he began, still not looking at me. This isn't working for us. This marriage, it's not working. I felt a chill run down my spine. Steve, what are you saying? He turned, his eyes cold and distant. I want a divorce, Rita. I can't do this anymore. You're holding me back. You and Junior. You're draining me, pulling me down. I need to focus on my business, on getting back on my feet. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. I stood there, frozen, unable to process what he was saying. Divorce. The word echoed in my mind, sharp and painful. Steve, we can walk through this, I said, my voice trembling. We're a family. We can get through this. He shook his head. No, Rita, I've made up my mind. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I want you and Junior out of the house by the end of the week. My heart sank. This was real. He wasn't just lashing out in anger. He meant it. Where will we go? I asked, barely able to get the words out. That's your problem, he said coldly. You wanted to play the role of a housewife, so figure it out. I stared at him, a man I no longer recognized, the man I had married, the man I had loved, was gone. In his place was a stranger, someone who saw me as a burden, an obstacle in his path to success. Steve, please, I whispered, tears filling my eyes. Think about Junior. He needs his father. I'll send money for him, he said dismissively. But I can't have you both here. Not anymore. There was nothing more to say. I turned and walked out of the room, my heart breaking with each step. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall, my legs threatening to give out beneath me. I had to be strong for Junior. I had to find a way to pick up the pieces of our lives and start over. The weeks passed in a blur. I packed our things, trying to keep up a brave face for Junior, who was too young to understand why we were leaving. Steve barely spoke to us, his presence in the house a looming shadow. When the day came to leave, I stood in the doorway of our home, a suitcase in one hand and Junior's small hand in the other. Steve didn't even say goodbye. He was already out the door, heading to another meeting, another deal that would likely fall through. I found us a small apartment in Lagos, far from the life I had known. It wasn't much, it was ours, and it was safe. I used the last of our savings to cover the first month's rent and started applying for jobs at banks, throwing on the skills I had let lie dormant for too long. Weeks turned into months, and slowly we began to find our footing. I landed a job as an assistant manager at a reputable bank, the same position I had once held before Steve had convinced me to leave it all behind. But this time, I wasn't leaving for anyone. This time, I was here to stay. The work was hard, the hours long, but it felt good. Good to be doing something, to be providing for Junior, to be standing on my own 2 feet again. The pain of the divorce, the betrayal, still lingered, but it wasn't paralyzing me anymore. It was a scar, not a wound. And as the months passed, I started to heal. 3 years had passed since Steve had thrown us out. 3 years of rebuilding, of finding myself again. Junior was thriving in school, and I had been promoted to branch manager, a position that came with a move to Abuja. It was a fresh start, a new chapter, and I was ready for it. But life has a way of circling back, of bringing the past into the present in unexpected ways. One afternoon, as I was going through some paperwork in my new office, my secretary buzzed in. "Mrs. Rita, there's a Mr. Steve waiting to see you." My heart skipped a bit. Steve. I hadn't seen him since the divorce. Hadn't heard from him except for the sporadic payments he sent for Junior's upkeep. What was he doing here? "Send him in," I said, my voice steady, though my hands trembled slightly as I set down the papers. The door opened, and there he was. But he wasn't the Steve I remembered, the confident, sharp-dressed man I had once known was gone. In his place was a man who looked older, worn down by life. His suit was rumpled, his hair graying at the temple, and there was a desperation in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. "Rita," he said, his voice hoarse. "Steve," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "What brings you here?" He hesitated, looking around the office before meeting my eyes. I need help, Rita. The bank, your bank, they are threatening to take my house. I am defaulting on my loan, and I don't have the money to pay it back. I thought maybe you could help me work something out." I stared at him, the man who had once held all the power in our relationship, now standing before me, broken and begging for help. A part of me felt pity, but another part, stronger, louder, felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "This bank doesn't offer special favors, Steve," I said, leaning back in my chair. "You should know that." "Rita, please," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm about to lose everything. I don't have anywhere else to turn." I studied him, this man who had once dismissed me, belittled me, thrown me and our son out like we were nothing. And now, here he was, asking for mercy. "What happened to all your investments, Steve?" I asked, my voice hard. "All those business deals that were supposed to make you rich, the ones you didn't need my advice for." He winced, looking down at the floor. They didn't work out. I lost everything." "Everything?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Or just what you thought was important?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I could see it in his eyes, in the slump of his shoulders. He had lost more than just money. He had lost his pride, his confidence, everything that had once made him who he was. "Steve," I said, my voice softening slightly, "you made your choices. You threw us out, believing you didn't need us. And now you're here, asking for help from the same person you thought was beneath you. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. I was wrong, Rita. I know that now. But please help me, for Junior's sake, if not for mine. I stood up, walking around the desk to stand in front of him. He looked so small, so defeated, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. But then I remembered the nights I had spent crying myself to sleep, the fear of not knowing how I would provide for our son, the pain of being told I was worthless, and that pity turned to steel. Junior is doing just fine without you, Steve, I said quietly. And so am I. He flinched, as if I had slapped him. Rita, please, he whispered, tears glistening in his eyes. I don't know what else to do. I took a deep breath, the memories of our life together flashing through my mind, the good times, the laughter, the love that had once been so strong. But those memories were overshadowed by the pain, the betrayal, the way he had discarded us when we needed him most. I'm sorry, Steve, I said, my voice faint, but this is your mess to clean up, not mine. He stared at me, his eyes wide with shock and desperation. Rita, goodbye, Steve, I said, cutting him off. I wish you luck. He stood there for a moment, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Then slowly he turned and walked out of the office, the door closing softly behind him. I stood there for a long time staring at the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I had done it. I had stood up to him, refused to be pulled back into the darkness he had created. And as I sat back down at my desk, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. I had survived, I had thrived, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me, not even Steve. The weeks after Steve's visit passed quickly. The weight of that encounter slowly lifted from my shoulder, replaced by a sense of liberation. I was no longer bound by the chains of our past, no longer tethered to the pain he had caused. I was free. Junior and I settled into our new life in Abuja. The city was different from Lagos, quieter, more orderly, but with its own rhythm that we quickly adapted to. Junior was flourishing at his new school, making friends and excelling in his studies. He didn't ask about his father, and I didn't volunteer any information. Steve had made his choice, and now we were making ours. At the bank, I threw myself into work, determined to build something for myself and my son. My team respected me, and I earned their trust by leading with the same principle I had tried to bring into my marriage: communication, transparency, and mutual respect. It was ironic, really, that the skills Steve had dismissed were the ones that were now helping me succeed. One afternoon, as I was leaving the office, my secretary handed me a letter. I recognized the handwriting immediately: Steve's. Standing in the hallway, the envelope heavy in my hand, part of me wanted to toss it in the trash, to let the past stay where it belonged. But another part, a part that still cared, wanted to know what he wanted to say. I waited until I was home, Junior busy with his homework, before opening the letter. Rita, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to say this to you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything, for the way I treated you, for not valuing you, for thinking that my pride was more important than our family. You were right about everything, about the investments, about the way I pushed you away, about how I let my ego destroy our marriage. I see that now, but it's too late to fix it. I lost the house. I'm staying with a friend, trying to figure out what to do next. I thought I could make it on my own, but I didn't need anyone. But I was wrong. I needed you. I let you slip through my fingers. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to respond. I just needed to tell you that I am sorry. Take care of Junior. He deserves better than me. Steve. I sat there, the letter in my lap, a strange mix of emotions swirling inside me: anger, pity, sadness, and unexpectedly relief. He had finally admitted to his mistakes, finally seen the truth of what had happened between us. But it didn't change anything. The damage was done, and there was no going back. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. It was a piece of my past, a chapter that was finally closed. I had no desire to open it anymore. Junior and I were building a new life, one that didn't include the pain of the past. We're moving forward, and that was all that mattered. As I looked out the window, the city lights twinkling in the distance, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. It was my life now, my son, my career, my peace, and it was more than enough. I had been through the fire and had come out stronger on the other side. The future was mine to shape, and I knew deep down inside my heart that I would never let anyone take that away from me again. The dawn was breaking, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next.